Hey there guys, how's it going? Back with another movie review. So, you guys that have been following my channel will know that I quite recently did my top 10 favourite comic book movies of all time in my personal opinion. And one of the things that I talked about in the early part of that video was the fact that I am pretty much sick and tired of modern day comic book movies. And I pointed out several times, within the past year or so that as far as comic book movies go, the biggest problem that they have right now, in my opinion, is that they're never standalone movies. Every time you see a comic book movie nowadays, they're always trying to set up a wider universe. They're always trying to sequel bait. They always have to tie into everything else that's going on in the background. And movies nowadays in the comic book genre, and you can say that about a lot of genres of movies nowadays, but in particular comic book movies, never feel like standalone movies. They never feel like there's any passion behind them, and they all feel very corporate. They all feel like a product, as if they're churning them out multiple times a year and churning them out straight off a conveyor belt, and it just takes away from the overall passion of the project, doesn't it? Well, that sort of issue that we have right now with modern day comic book movies kind of makes me look at these types of movies, early 2000s, 90s, 80s comic book movies in retrospect. And I have more of an appreciation for these movies now, because at very least, the vast majority of these movies were standalone movies. When you made a comic book movie in the 90s, or when you made a comic book movie in the early 2000s, like the one I'm about to talk about, these don't feel like products, okay? They feel like movies. They feel like a director and a studio actually had a vision and actually had, the intent on making a good movie for the audience. Now, this movie, Fantastic Four, from 2005, and of course the sequel, which came out a couple of years later in 2007, when it comes to critical reception, these movies got absolutely slaughtered, particularly from what I remember the first one. I can remember the first one getting more harshly critiqued than the second one, although the second one might actually have a lower rating on most sites. The second one, I can remember quite clearly when it came out that the second one, I can remember, got quite a bit of praise for its special effects, although most people didn't like the movie. They did concede that it had some really good special effects. It was a very good looking movie. But the first movie got absolutely tore apart and shredded critically, and I've got to be honest guys, I have never understood why. In my personal opinion, Fantastic Four from 2005 is a very, very underrated comic book movie. I've actually never, for the life of me, been able to understand why people hate this movie so much, and especially looking back at the movie in retrospect. And look guys, I've always liked this movie, okay? I saw it at the cinema, I enjoyed it, I got it on DVD when it came out. I saw the sequel at the cinema too, and although the sequel wasn't as good, I still somewhat enjoyed it, and I don't think it was anywhere near as bad as the critics made it out. And yeah, I've always kind of enjoyed this movie. It wasn't on my top 10 favourite list, don't get me wrong, but it's still a movie that I think is underrated, and still a movie that I personally enjoy. But in retrospect, after watching the reboot that came out in 2015, and I saw that one in the theatre too, and believe me, that movie, the reboot from 2015, deserves all the criticism it got and then some. That movie was an absolute dumpster fire. That movie absolutely sucks. I'm sorry, but it does. That movie was garbage. One of the worst comic book movies I think I've ever seen. And yeah, that one deserves the criticism, because that movie sucks. But this movie, after watching that one, I actually view this one a little bit... I view this one, and it seems a little bit better in retrospect when I look at a lot of modern day comic book movies. I would like for someone to tell me, somebody in the comment section please, because I've seen a lot of reviews for this movie, and I've listened to a lot of feedback, in regards to how this movie was perceived critically, and how people just absolutely shredded it and tore it apart. I have yet to hear a credible argument for why this is a bad movie. I mean, first of all, to just talk about the technicalities of this movie and the special effects and how this movie looks. If you were to watch this movie, and guys, I'm serious about this, I'm not trying to be satirical here, I'm not trying to be funny, I'm being 100% serious. This is what I want you guys to do, right? Go and watch this movie, right? And then right after, Watch a movie like Black Panther, for example, a movie that was critically acclaimed, a movie that had critics and audiences gushing over it, talking about how it was the greatest thing they'd ever seen, the greatest comic book movie of all time, and it was just perfect, it was fantastic, and it could do no wrong, and people were scared to criticize it. Anybody that criticized it was a racist, this, that, and the other. Go and watch that movie, right? And watch this movie. You tell me what looks better, just in terms of technicalities, just in terms of, the movie's CG or the movie's practical effects or the stunt work or the way that superpowers and real life practical sets look. Just tell me what movie, this movie from 2005 or Black Panther from 2018, which of these two movies looks more authentic to you? I mean, Black Panther from 2018, so what, 13 years after this movie from 2005, on a much larger budget, with a much larger studio behind it, Black Panther looked like a fucking video game cutscene. Now, I don't remember a single critic when Black Panther came out, there might have been some since, but I can't remember a single mainstream critic criticized Black Panther for its special effects. I can't remember any of these critics talk about how terrible the CGI was and how it looked goofy and terrible and awful, and it was just a poorly designed and poor looking movie with just full of green screen and CGI and all that crap. I can't remember one of these mainstream critics saying anything like that about Black Panther. But when it comes to this Fantastic Four movie, all I ever hear from critics is how bad the movie looks, and how all the CGI and all the effects and all the green screen and all this, that, and the other. A movie from 2005, which, by the way, there isn't even a whole lot of green screen in this movie. There are actually quite a few practical sets in this movie used, and it's surprising to hear people complain about how this movie looks and the technicalities of it, when a movie like, let's look at some other examples. I mean, I've talked about Black Panther. A movie like Captain Marvel. Go and look at that movie. Again, another movie that had critics gushing over it, saying it was so good. Go and look at Captain Marvel's special effects and CGI and green screen and all that, and compare it to this movie from 2005. You tell me what looks better. Okay, just watch the movies one after the other. You tell me which of the movies has better special effects. Alright, watch this movie, and then go and watch a movie like Justice League, okay, from 2017. Again, huge budget movie with a big studio behind it, okay. You tell me, the CGI in this movie from 2005, the special effects in this movie from 2005, alright, the practical effects, the costumes, everything, and compare it to a movie from 2017, okay, Justice League. You tell me what looks better. What looks more realistic to you? What looks more authentic to you, this movie or Justice League? I'll let you decide. And the reason I bring all this up is because that highlights to me that just how out of touch critics are, and general audiences too, if I'm being honest, how out of touch they are with their criticisms of certain movies. The criticisms of this movie on a technical level, people talking about how bad it looks and how bad the special effects were, seem to give other movies which look way worse, I'm talking way worse, they seem to give those movies a pass for looking a lot worse than this. So in terms of the special effects of this movie and just the way the movie looks, the technicalities and how it's made, everything about the way the movie looks, to me, I don't have a problem with it. I have no idea why that was such a talking point for critics. Now, in terms of the movie's characters and its story, now, my one criticism of it would be that there wasn't a whole lot of action in the movie. Now, the reason I bring that up is because the characters and the story and stuff like that have to be very, very good. Like, if you're going to have a movie that doesn't have any action, or that at least doesn't have a lot of action, you're going to have very engaging characters, and it's going to have to be well written. The writing is going to have to keep the reader engaged. You look at, for example, a movie like Unbreakable from M. Night Shyamalan, which again is technically a comic book movie. Technically it is. There's only one action scene of that movie, and it's one action scene right towards the end. It's within like the final 10 minutes of the movie. So, You know, that movie had to be very well written in order to hold your attention for an hour and a half before that action scene. So yeah, and thankfully it did. This movie, I guess a lot of people didn't really resonate with the characters. Personally, I found the characters to be very charming, very likable. I found sort of the chemistry between them to be pretty good. I mean, it's definitely a lot better than what we've seen in a lot of recent comic book movies. I mean, in Justice League, every single character just annoyed the shit out of me, and I didn't like a single one of them. In the more recent Fantastic Four movie, the one from 2015, just the CGI clusterfuck of a remake. That movie, the characters were just poorly cast, in my opinion, as well. No chemistry between them whatsoever, no charisma, just boring, lame, garbage, poorly acted, and I just didn't like it at all. And in retrospect, the casting choices behind this movie didn't really bother me. I mean, the guy that played Mr. Fantastic, I forget how you pronounce that guy's name, Ioan Gruffudd or whatever. I don't know how you pronounce his name. It's a weird spelling of that guy's name. I've no idea how you pronounce it. So I apologise if I butchered your name just there if you're listening to this. But I thought he did a very good job. He was very likable as Mr. Fantastic, and he was, you know, very sweet and nerdy, but at the same time he was stoic, and he showed himself to be a good leader. And I don't know, I like the character. The character was fine to me. You had Ben Grimm, obviously the Thing. I forget the name of the dude that plays him, my bad, but again, I thought he did a really good job, and the special effects behind the Thing character were pretty good. I mean, it's not CGI garbage, you know, CGI trash like in the remake. In this movie, it's an actual suit. It's an actual practical suit that genuinely looks like rock, like his mouth moves and his eyes move and all that, and it genuinely looks like rock. And they add certain sound effects, like for example where he gets shot and a piece of rock, you know, just snaps on his back, and that was quite, you know, quite realistic. And you know, the scene where he's saving everybody from an accident that you know that he accidentally caused on a bridge, where he's pulling up the fire engine and saving the firefighters, that was a pretty cool scene. And the, you know, the special effects there were realistic. Okay, there's a lot of realistic special effects in this movie, and I thought that the Thing character in particular, you know, the Thing had some very good special effects behind his character, and I really did enjoy looking at it. And I thought that his acting was very good in the movie too, and he's the character who you feel for the most, because he's very frustrated in the sense that, you know, everyone else got superpowers, whereas he turned into like a grotesque looking monster, you know, who's made of rock but who's super strong and can't really control his strength. And there's a really sad scene where his basically his fiance breaks up with him because of what's happened to him, and she puts his ring down, and he's trying to pick it up and he can't, and his friend helps him. And I thought that was a really sad scene, you know, very, very again, if you're sensitive, that's a tear-inducing scene. It really is really sad, and it really makes you understand his character motivation, why he ultimately wants to reverse what's happened to him. And then when he makes a decision towards the end of the movie to remain as the Thing because he needs this power to save his friend's life, and he makes a heroic decision there. And I really did like that. I like the character development with him and how he sort of accepts the way he looks in the end, and you know, he accepts who he's going to be now. And I liked that. I didn't mind it at all. I thought the writing there was good, and I thought the acting there was good. Human Torch, played by Chris Evans, who obviously famously went on to play Captain America. I liked his portrayal as Human Torch personally. I thought he did a great job as the Human Torch. You know, Human Torch is a bit of a reckless, hothead type character who's doesn't take anything seriously, and who's constantly just jumping in head first without thinking about what he's doing. And you know, he loves the attention and the fame, so in a way he's a bit of an asshole, but he also does prove himself to be a hero also later on in the movie, so there's a bit of character development for him. And the sequel to this movie actually had a lot more character development for him too. Like, he had to change a lot in the sequel, but in this movie it's touched on a little bit, and he's not quite as developed as some of the other characters. But again, I thought Chris Evans did a good job as the character, you know, a good acting performance. As for Jessica Alba, look, Jessica Alba cannot act to save her life. Okay, she's one of the worst actresses of all time, so there, yeah. I agree with that, yeah. But I mean, for what she's given here, look, she's in the movie to be eye candy. Okay, that's why she's there. Okay, she's hot. She looks hot in a costume, and that's why she's there. Okay, she's the female character who looks hot and sounds hot, and she's there for you to look at. That's it. She can't act to save her life. Yeah, they could have casted somebody else to play her. But again, for what she's given in this movie, she's not really given a whole lot to do that's really that intriguing. Her character isn't really that compared to the other characters. To me, she isn't really that interesting. But she's just a love interest for Reed Richards, and him and Doctor Doom have sort of a love triangle with her, and it is what it is. Okay, again, it's not one of the movie's strongest points. Again, Jessica Alba can't act to save her life, so that's not one of the strongest points of the movie. I never said this movie was perfect. This movie does have a few issues, but it's not enough for me to really bash the movie. It's just a minor problem that the movie has, a minor inconsistency. As for the villain of the movie, now this is another thing that got tore apart by critics, is Victor Von Doom. Again, I forget the name of the actor who played him. I'm forgetting the name of these people in this movie, but yeah, the guy that played Victor Von Doom, I mean, he was definitely a lot better than the shitty-ass 2015 Victor Von Doom version. Now, in this movie, he's sort of like a egomaniacal businessman who's competing with Reed Richards. I know that in the comics, he and Reed Richards had more of a deep backstory together. They had more history. Like in the comics, Reed Richards tried to save Victor Von Doom from an experiment he did, which went wrong, and Victor Von Doom ended up deformed. He ended up messing up his face, and he basically blamed Reed Richards for what happened and whatnot. He thinks that Reed Richards sabotaged him and caused him to be deformed, and that was what sort of set him on his path. But in this movie, it's very different. Basically, Victor Von Doom goes up to the space station with them and is caught up in the accident, and it sort of gives him this weird infection where his body is starting to turn into metal, like the metal from the ship that they were in, and he's able to conduct electricity, and he has like crazy superpowers, and it's very different from the comics, but I didn't really mind it. I mean, at least the costume and the mask and all that, and the cloak and the green hood and all that looked quite similar to the comics. And again, I didn't mind him as a villain. I didn't think he was a great villain at all, but I didn't think he was one of the worst villains. I mean, he wasn't like, like a villains that you see nowadays, like the villain from Black Panther who was evil Black Panther, or the villain from Ant-Man who was evil Ant-Man. Just villains nowadays you see in these comic book movies are so lame, it's pathetic. This movie, I didn't mind him as the villain. I thought he was okay, but my overall impression of this movie is it's a decent movie. There's quite a cool scene where Johnny Storm is snowboarding and his powers activate, and he ends up in like a sort of a makeshift jacuzzi, and he just goes, "Care to join me?" And there's some funny comedy like that, involving him, where he's having a fight with the thing, and the thing's just like, "Okay, you want to fly? Then fly," and he just punches him. Or a scene where there's sort of a montage where they're all trying to learn to live together, and Johnny's sort of playing pranks on the thing. That was reminiscent of the animated series and the comic books and whatnot, where they would banter with one another and whatnot. There's another scene where a lady gives Chris Evans a thermometer, gives Johnny Storm the thermometer, and she just goes, "You're hot," and he's like, "Well, thank you, so are you." So there's funny dialogue and one-liners in this movie that I liked, and I enjoyed it. And like I said, my main issue with the movie, the fact that there's not a whole lot of action. There's only really one big action scene towards the end, which is a pretty decent action scene. It was quite a fun action scene. It's just that there wasn't enough of it. And yeah, Jessica Alba's acting just can't act. But the special effects of the movie, I think, are perfectly fine, especially for a 2005 comic book movie. And I think the movie's well paced. It's a funny movie with plenty of comedy, and it's got some family themes, friendship themes. And I thought it was a fun movie. I really did. I've got no issue with this movie. So if I were to give this movie a rating, I would give it a 7 out of 10, because I think it's just a decent, fun popcorn flick. I really do. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as some other comic book movies. I would watch this movie any day over the 2015 remake. I would watch this movie any day over Black Panther. I would watch this movie any day over Justice League. I would watch this movie any day over Captain Marvel or some shit like that. Like a lot of these modern day garbage ass comic book films that get so much critical praise but for nothing because they're the same shit repeated over and over. So this movie I think is a decent one, and I think it was a lot better than people and critics gave it credit for, and I've never really understood the criticism for it. So let me know what you guys think anyway. Stay tuned for more movie reviews. Let me know what you guys think, and let me know if you guys want to see more content like this. If you want to see me talk about more comic book themed movies and stuff like that. Thanks for watching anyway. God bless.